chemical imbalance theory, the real roots, pun intended, of that come from a pharmaceutical marketing campaign rather than actual robust science. And if you need one more little bullet point for me to explain as to how true this is, has anybody ever tested your child? Or have you ever heard of an actual test for chemical imbalance? Do they run blood work and lab work and go, the good stuff that keeps you calm and regulated is too low, and the supposed bad stuff that causes ADHD and anxiety is too high? Welcome to the Experience Miracles podcast, where we help parents find hope, answers, and drug-free help to overcome your child's chronic health challenges. I'm your host, Dr. Tony Ebel, and I'll be sharing my experiences as both a dad and a doctor on every episode. I can take the latest science and neurology of healing and break it down in the most simple and relatable way possible. We'll take on the toughest topics and answer your biggest questions through interviews with other amazing parents and leading experts, leaving you with practical action steps that you can take to help your child heal and thrive. It's time to expect and experience miracles. Let's get started. All right, parents, welcome back to another episode of the Experience Miracles podcast. This is a hot topic episode, and I actually wish it were more of a hot topic. I really wish, because the science, I'll kind of call it the myth, the debunking, the gig has been up about the chemical imbalance theory, not really at all being close to accurate neuroscientific explanations behind ADHD and anxiety. But yet you rarely hear anybody talk about this. You certainly don't hear doctors, pediatricians, neurologists sharing this scientific truth with parents. You don't really hear it in traditional media because you really don't usually hear much actual truth in traditional media at all. But this is a big deal. It's a hot topic. It's actually a very personal topic for me. If you've been following along with the Experience Miracles podcast, I've talked about ADHD and I've talked about anxiety a lot. And for me, personally, ADHD is definitely a personal conversation. You've probably listened many times over and thought, goodness gracious, this guy has ADHD. He's talking a million miles an hour, and then he goes off on seemingly 3 to 4 different tangents at the same time, but yet somehow keeps a through line all the way through it and comes back to the main take-home point. At least I'd like to think I do. I think I make it back to home base at least 90% of the time. But I absolutely, positively, every single day in my prayers, I thank God for giving me ADHD. We're going to talk about it again today in the right way, not as a disorder. And we're going to talk about anxiety too. There is actually, I know that both of these things, because of the way the pharmaceutical industry, here's how it went. Let me just get right into that. They sold it to us as a problem. They sold it to us as a disease, a disorder, right? And then they sold us a absolutely not true at all root cause theory of chemical imbalance. And the reason they did that, the reason that they want us to think, oh, ADHD is all bad. There's nothing but bad to it. And anxiety as well. It's all bad. There's nothing but bad to it. There's no good to it. You can't possibly, oh, your child's broken. You're broken. This is genetic. There's nothing you can do about it, but it's real bad. So you have to take our medications. That's the truth. The reason we need to debunk this theory is we have to expose it for what it is. It was a part of the frickin' slide deck to sell it to us. It's part of the marketing presentation to say that it's a chemical imbalance. Because let's not overcomplicate it. If we were to believe that it's genetic and our brain's chemistry, our body's chemistry, our child's brain and body chemistry were just simply programmed wrong. They have too little of the good stuff, serotonin and dopamine, and too much of the bad stuff, adrenaline and epinephrine, and it's just chemically constructed that way, genetically, nothing you can do about it. Well, then they would get us thinking and believing that we need to be dependent upon stimulant medications and so forth for ADHD and a similar but slightly different medication class for anxiety and so forth. And so this is a very important episode where I'm going to do as I always do, get into the real neuroscience behind the root cause of ADHD and anxiety, but I'm also going to get into the real truth as to where this chemical imbalance theory really came from. And I also want to add this truth. There's a couple of them in here that I'm looking to overlap and deliver to you, your family, your kiddos, and especially if your teenager or your young adult struggles with ADHD and anxiety. I actually have a special request with this one. have them listen to this episode. Either listen to it to them together or send it to them and see if they'll listen to it. Because again, as someone who absolutely does have a very productive, I consider to be wonderful version, so thankful to God version that I have ADHD, I want to be able to see how much good can come from understanding what's really going on with the brain and the nervous system with ADHD and anxiety, how to really harness the way that God designed those of us that fit this diagnostic criteria. But then what I want to take that, I want to take that diagnostic conversation and I want to turn it literally, actually 180 degrees in the opposite direction from with which conventional medicine and the pharmaceutical sales engine has told us. I want you to know that there is absolutely challenges, real life challenges, for sure, son of a gun, that come with ADHD and anxiety. When you're wired to be more on the gas pedal and maybe don't have as easily accessible brake pedal. These are terms and metaphors I promise you I'll get into the neuroscience section of this and come back around on. Yeah, you can run off the rails a lot easier. Yes, it's a little bit or sometimes a lot of bit harder to pay attention, to keep things organized, to follow through, to keep track of everything, to calm your emotions. All of these things are very true. There's also many different incredible scenarios in life where it's good to be extra driven. It's good to be extra wired. It's good to be extra acutely, even emotionally, behaviorally tuned into something that you are wildly passionate and compassionate about. So I guess I'm kind of getting that truth out of the way right out of the gates, that there's a core principle or belief system that we have here from the Experience Miracles podcast and the PX Docs platform, and just me personally, that says, these aren't all bad, okay? And not only is that an important message, but it's also important to get to the real, actual science of what's really actually causing ADHD and anxiety. And so for that, we're going to talk about topics with this one, all related to the role of the nervous system, specifically nervous system dysregulation. And whenever the kind of D terms come around, so we're going to talk about nervous system dysfunction, dysregulation, dysautonomia. Well, when the nervous system's operating in that mode, that's not the mode we want to be in. That's where these challenges flip to their bad side and they become a detriment. They become a challenge to our quality of life. On the other side of nervous system dysregulation, however, we're going to talk about nervous system regulation. We're going to talk about nervous system optimization. We're going to talk about building resilience, building stability and slack into how the brain and the body operate so that we're not on edge all the time, so that we're not wound up all the time, so that we're not impulsive and disorganized all the time. Because nervous system dysregulation being the real root cause of these issues, which is actually what puts the chemicals into different kind of distributions. The key then to getting out of that storm is get into regulation, get into resilience, get into balance. We're going to talk a lot about the vagus nerve. That guy, if there's a top 10 term on the Experience Miracles podcast outside of nervous system dysregulation, subluxation, dysautonomia, I think the vagus nerve, actually forget top 10, it's probably top 5. And so the vagus nerve is the number one nerve in charge of nervous system regulation, calming, and balancing our emotions, our focus, and all those things. And then we'll talk about where these things for so many kids today, why we're dealing with such an explosion of ADHD, which is now, again, and it's real. There's absolutely more perfect storm, more stress happening for our kiddos. So there is more wound up, dysregulated, sympathetic dominant, subluxated kids than ever before. That is true numerically and statistically. There is also a huge pharmaceutical medical system derived push to diagnose as many kids so they can treat as many kids as possible with these medications, hopefully for life. So don't get me wrong, some of that explosion in these stats that tend to, depending on what you look at, 10 to 14% of U.S. kids, children, are diagnosed with ADHD, and millions of them, literally millions, of taking a medication that is called a stimulant medication, which is a class 2 narcotic. And actually, this has been in the news. Instead of actually exposing the fact that the chemical imbalance isn't true, they have talked about it in the news, and they always spin it, right? To be like, oh no, this is not good. There's actually been a shortage in the ability to supply all the kids, and there's millions of adults taking ADHD medications as well. And many times over the last couple of years, there's actually been a shortage of the supply. What they never talk about in those news articles or stories is why the shortage is there. Did you know that the substance they use to make those medications is in the exact same regulated class 2 narcotic class as cocaine and methamphetamines? So the DEA actually has to regulate how much access pharmaceutical companies get to the stuff. And so if they can't keep up the supply, they can't keep up. So they've literally created such a demand for these class 2 narcotics sold through the medical system and the pharmaceutical system, and the insurance, of course, pays for it. They literally run out of supply sometimes. And so it's a big freaking deal to have this conversation and get you to know that, yes, your child's right now, if their nervous system is completely wound up, completely over sympathetic dominant and in overdrive, they may be really struggling, and quality of life may be really interfered with as a result. So you'd really like to know the actual root cause and then get solutions and care options that address the actual root cause, not the middleman. And I want you to stick with that for this podcast. When we talk about this chemical imbalance conversation, we are not actually going to throw the baby out, the full thing out with the bathwater, because there is imbalance in these neurotransmitters when our nervous systems are imbalanced. Because that's the word. Neurotransmitters transmit messages for the brain and the body and the nervous system communication. So that's a nervous system imbalance, dysautonomia, dysregulation. So the chemical imbalances, they aren't genetic. They're not pre-programmed. They're not just there at random. They are there because of something. Now, there's something even before that. Why are our kids' nervous systems so sympathetic dominant? Why is the vagus nerve so shut down, underdeveloped, and suppressed? So that, again, is the perfect storm. And so we have to really continue to get into this conversation and say, well, if chemical imbalances aren't the actual root cause of the symptoms and conditions, what is? And how do we know that? How do we find that? How do we address that drug-free? And how do we get through that? So I'm going to kind of put a bow on this kind of first layer of truth by saying just what's true. The chemical imbalance theory, the real roots, pun intended, of that come from a pharmaceutical marketing campaign rather than actual robust science. And if you need one more little bullet point for me to explain as to how true this is, has anybody ever tested your child? Or have you ever heard of an actual test for chemical imbalance? Do they run blood work and lab work and go, your serotonin and dopamine, and I'm oversimplifying this intentionally, the good stuff that keeps you calm and regulated is too low, and the supposed bad stuff that causes ADHD and anxiety is too high? Anybody ever seen a blood test? Wouldn't it make sense if this science was really true, especially in today's world where we can do such advanced testing with lab work, imaging, brains, everything else? Wouldn't we be able to find this? And let's carry this out to what actually real, great, clinical care would be if that theory were true. Well, then you could measure the exact amount of imbalance, right? And then you could tailor the amount of artificial chemicals coming from the medication and put that amount into the kid's system. Those of you that have been down these roads and know it doesn't go that way at all. Your children are diagnosed after filling out a survey. Psychiatrists often don't even hardly meet the kiddo, let alone have a conversation and get into the actual, challenges of that child or that patient's life. You fill out a survey. In today's world, you can do it online. You're already pre-diagnosed as ADHD and anxiety. They sold it to you before, anything else. The teacher put the fear in you. The school put the fear in you about your child. They said, you got to go. And they consider this best practices, right? And there's no consultation. There's really no conversation. It's just kind of checking the box if there is, 8 minutes, 15 minutes. And you walk out the door from the pediatrician, the neurologist, or the psychiatrist's office, and you've got a diagnosis, you've got a medication. And I'll tell you what it really is. It's throwing darts. Try this one at that dosage. Okay, what actual testing, labs, exam, clinical criteria do you have to say this is the best medication for my child and this is the best dosage? It's really... And I'm about to say something that actually is kind of hard to rank these because there's so many of them, but it's one of the real freaking worst showings of medicine. Like when you really open the hood and you look at this, you just go, dang, that is a horrendous level of clinical care. We're selling millions of prescriptions of these medications based upon a scientific theory that has been debunked, and there's no lab testing for it. There's no personalization or customization of the medication, of the dosage, of the amount. And even if they tried to do that, by the way, if that was actually possible, our nervous system, the balance or imbalance of the nervous system, changes so rapidly, so dynamically. And dynamically means a word, it's constantly changing, literally second to second, minute to minute, that you could never actually really count on an outside in chemical, artificial influence to try and find balance. There's no way that you could just know the numbers all the time and have the labs match that. So what do we need to trust instead? So where could we turn our attention instead to root cause understanding and root cause drug-free solutions? We could turn our attention to that incredible, wildly intelligent, innate design that God already put inside our brains and bodies, called the nervous system, called the vagus nerve and the autonomic nervous system. See, the nervous system is primarily a sensory system. The nervous system's job is to perceive the environment and coordinate the behavior of all other cells. That's a quote by one of my favorite epigenetic, neurobiological expert researchers, Dr. Bruce Lipton. And I want to say it one more time. The function of the nervous system is to perceive, so that's sensory, perceive the environment and coordinate the behavior of all other cells. Now, you could take that wonderful, brilliant, all-encompassing quote from Dr. Lipton, and you could change a few words to really specify into this conversation. The function of the nervous system is to perceive our environment and coordinate the behavior and balance or imbalance of neurotransmitters. Because those are cells. Those are just functions of the body that are under the perception, coordination, and regulation of the nervous system. So it literally says the word behavior in there, and that's ADHD. And you could take the word behavior and you could swap it with emotions or mood. So the function of our nervous system, and the nervous system is perceiving our environment. So what I want you to see, and I'm kind of trying to slow my cadence here in the middle of this one, so you're really picking up, because this is the meat of the episode here. There's two big factors at hand that are causing ADHD, anxiety, and also all the other conditions and disorders that are like them. Number one, we have more dysfunctional, dysregulated neurosensory systems than ever before. Our nervous systems, our kiddos' nervous systems, and our own nervous systems' ability to function in this perception, coordination, regulation cycle is more discombobulated, off track, and what we would call in chiropractic subluxated, meaning there's interference to it. It's not doing its job very well at all. It's dysfunctional. That's problem number one. Number two, we're asking our nervous systems to respond to the most highly wound, high stress, high demand, high toxin society ever. And so the environment that the nervous system is supposed to coordinate and respond to, right? The environment's crazy. The environment is wound up. And where does that environment, that high stress environment begin? The fertility journey, the pregnancy journey, the labor and delivery journey. And then when we trust the conventional medical system and pediatrician with the health, wellness, and promotion of our kiddos, and every time we go into the pediatrician's office, it's more fear, and it's more anxiety, and it's more injections, and it's more medications. Does that build balance? Does that build resilience? Does that create regulation and function within the nervous system? No, because what we're talking about here, and I end up talking about it needingly so, on every single episode, is the perfect storm. And so stress onto our nervous systems from the environment shows up more early and more often than ever before. And putting that all together in accumulation, that is the real root cause of ADHD, anxiety, autism, sensory, seizures, you name it. And so our kids are under more stress, more early, more often than ever before. And we're under more stress, more demand, more chaos, more toxins than ever before. And so even though for those minutes, I took that conversation and separated into a two-part problem, the nervous system being stressed and dysfunctional, and the environment being highly stressful, highly toxic, and too much, too early, too often for every kiddo and every one of us, it's actually a vicious cycle. If you dig all the way into it, it's the environment and the perfect storm that first triggers the nervous system to be sympathetic dominant, to be dysregulated, to be in this state of what's called subluxation, a dysautonomia, where the vagus nerve, the calming, regulating side of the nervous system, is shut down. So what do we do about it? So now let's round third base, as we do in every single one of these episodes, and we have to say, all right, we're making sense of this. We're understanding this. But what if that perfect storm already happened? What if what if fertility and pregnancy was already super stressful and labor and delivery had induction and forceps and vacuum and cord wraps and decelerations and meconium and C-sections and all the interventions came in the pediatrician's office and all the antibiotics have already come and disrupted the gut and things we've covered on this podcast? What if you're listening in and you go, okay, all of this is making sense as to these perfect storm sequences of high stress, high toxicity, medical interventions, all the things that would have caused my child's nervous system to be dysregulated, out of balance, dysautonomia, too much fight or flight sympathetic, too little vagus nerve, brake pedal, regulation, calming side of it. I can't go back in time. I can't go back and prevent the storm. But you absolutely, positively can heal and repair the nervous system going forward. And because I really wanted to separate what eventually becomes one problem into two there over the last 10 minutes, because that's how I want you to see the healing process going forward. The two parts of this that are most important, and I'm going to do them in the order by with which they need to operate for maximum effectiveness. Part number one is, if you are confident by listening to this and all the other episodes and going to our Instagram and Facebook and going to our website and reading all the articles and all the science behind what we're talking about with the perfect storm in the nervous system, that needs to get fixed. Now, I intentionally use that word that I said so I can actually deconstruct it in a different way here. ADHD, anxiety kiddos, ADHD, anxiety adults are not broken. This is not a forever bad programming genetic disease that can never, ever be healed, restored, and repaired, and you just have to take medication or supplementation or whatever from it. But what if there is dysfunction and even neurological damage that has occurred within the brain, the body, and the nervous system? That's where, for me, being an Iowa farm kid, I'm comfortable using the word fix, or I'm comfortable using the words repair, restore, reorganize the nervous system, because there is a level of that work that needs to happen, as we would say in chiropractic, from the inside out first. See, this becomes a perfect storm and a vicious cycle where, yes, the environment being too stressful, too toxic, and too chaotic caused it. Like if you had chronological this thing all the way out, it was that. But we can't go back in time. We can't get with Doc and Marty McFly and hop in the DeLorean and go back in time and prevent all that. And many of us, my family included with Oliver's story, we actually knew these were all causes of issues, and you still, because it's just how it is for some of us, and some stories, and some pregnancies, and some births, and some kiddos pass. There's injuries, there's interventions that are often actually life-saving, but they can also be life-altering when they kick a nervous system into this storm. So we can't go back in time, but we can get neurologically focused chiropractic care into your life and into your child's life. And the first level of care, the first phase of care, is what we call this release, repair, restore phase, where we've got to get in there and we've got to get the sympathetic nervous system to chill out. Because when you have an ADHD kiddo and an anxiety kiddo, or your ADHD or your anxiety is in the way, you are stuck on the gas pedal. The root cause, simple definition or explanation of dysautonomia and subluxation is this: the sympathetic nervous system is way overstimulated. It is stuck on. Your child has a Ferrari, McLaren engine, and Ford Fiesta from 1978, 280,000 miles with the brakes never changed brakes, okay? So they can go fast, real quick. Soccer, video games, anything that they love, yeah, no focus and concentration problems there, right? But now sitting in school, which moves slow, going through math class, which moves slow, keeping track of things, staying organized and doing projects and turning in homework. Those are all slow moving functions within the brain. They don't do those so well, right? So you have this stuck on gas pedal for your kiddo. There's another side of this though, just like we kind of talked about a two-part problem before. When we really get into the nervous system dysfunction, it's got 1A and 1B as well. The other side is the parasympathetic, vagus nerve, the rest, relaxation, regulation, concentration, behavior, and emotion regulation side of the nervous system is suppressed. So what subluxation does is it triggers an excessive sympathetic response, hyperarousal, hypersensitivity, easily triggered fight or flight. For some kids, that shows up as hyperactivity, impulsivity, and inattentiveness. And other kids, it shows up as anxiety. And other kiddos, it shows up as all of those. We have plenty of kids in our practice who are struggling with both. If you pull out the diagnostic criteria, they fit ADHD and they fit anxiety, all right? And then the other side of that is when they need the vagus nerve, when they need the parasympathetic system to what's called arouse or just stimulate and activate, subluxation suppresses and interferes with the function of the vagus nerve especially. And so when you need this calming response from the nervous system, you can't get it. And guess what follows those responses from within the nervous system? When the sympathetic nervous system is overstimulated, continually stimulated, excessively stimulated, guess what chemicals try and keep up? Cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine, the ones that are blamed for ADHD and anxiety. And guess which ones get used up too much and depleted? Serotonin and dopamine, the feel-good, stay calm, keep regulated chemicals. So there becomes a chemical imbalance due to the root cause imbalance, dysautonomia, dysregulation of the central and autonomic nervous system. So if we're just taking these chemicals and we're adding artificial chemicals in, guess what? Sometimes symptomatically it works. I've had patients, and it's way less these days than it used to be, but 15, 10 years ago, even people were a lot more skeptical. It's wild because the science was always on our side, but it takes time for certain things to become exposed for not true and other things to become exposed as true. Because the whole time the medical system's been trying to sell you medications, they've been trying to sell you that things like natural, chiropractic, that we're unscientific, anti-scientific, not scientific. Yeah, no, that's not true. We're very, 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 very scientific based, right? And we have it in spades. And so many times over the years, somebody would come to me and say, well, I absolutely have ADHD and I can't live without my medication. And I know that it's a chemical imbalance because if I don't take them, then I'm not better. And so what they're really saying is, I'm better when I'm on my medications. Now, let me pause here for a second. My goodness gracious. I've had times in my life where my ADHD before chiropractic was off the rails, and it was a detriment to my quality of life. I couldn't sleep literally for the first 20 years of my life. I couldn't fall asleep. I couldn't stay asleep. I couldn't focus in class. I couldn't turn my homework in on time. Like there was some absolute messy seasons of my life. And I know that anxiety, when it's in a completely dysregulated and exacerbated condition, is debilitating as well. So I'm not making light of this, and I'm not making light of the fact that sometimes it gets so bad and it's such a crisis emergent situation that God gave us those things, those doctors, those interventions. And it may sound like, again, throw the baby out the bathwater if you're mishearing what I'm saying, like the whole system, medical system, pharmaceutical system is bad here. No, it's ridiculously life-saving because sometimes trauma in life is so acute and so bad and so much, it's good to have a breather, right? It's good to have an intervention from the outside in to help us just take a moment, right? To be able to symptomatically not be so severe and then work on, hopefully, natural, drug-free, holistic, nervous system focused things to actually heal from the inside out. That's how our healthcare system should be built. But when people say, hey, if I don't take my medications, then I'm in a much worse place, so they must be working. Well, you can kind of get Socratic on that and go, but that also exposes the truth that it's not the real root cause. Because if it was truly a chemical imbalance, wouldn't that last? Wouldn't the response last? And that's what I'm truly going to finish up with. What I love about nervous system focused chiropractic, helping kiddos with ADHD and anxiety, is we do not diagnose. That is not our game at all. We do not diagnose conditions, even if it's within our scope. That is not at all what we do, and it's really not. So what we do instead is we become obsessed with the root cause. But when we're taking care of a child with ADHD or anxiety, or an adult with ADHD and anxiety, we're taking this root cause holistic care approach, not a treatment, not a cure approach, right? So it's literally, even in this space, it's the antithesis of medicine. But what I love so much about the changes that come from this kind of care is because you're actually going in and truly addressing the root cause. You get not only short-term benefits as this initial, what we call restoration. So the more kind of, in terms of time, frequency, and everything, the more aggressive or kind of high frequency part of care, you're getting in there and you're actually doing the work for the brain and the nervous system to get better. You're actually doing the reorganization, the repair, and the restoration of neurological function. Again, not treating, not curing. Your child, yourself, do that. It's in there. It's entirely capable. It takes time and it takes repetition. But when you make the right care plan, which is the time, the frequency, and the duration, with the right adjustments, and then you add in, remember how much we talked about the environment and the influence? And then we stop having so much stress and toxicity coming into our lives, and we can heal from both the inside and the outside at the same time, which is what we help our patients do. And I hope we're helping you do with this podcast. And you do that over a long enough, consistent enough period of time. Not only do you experience incredible healing changes, and not only do the ADHD challenges become superpowers and the anxiety challenges become advantages, because there absolutely is real life to that, but it starts to last. So you can actually help your nervous system through what's called neuroplasticity and neurological healing to change. And the nervous system changes over time for time. And the coolest part about this, and we always recommend ongoing chiropractic care for life. I get adjusted once or twice a week for the rest of my life to keep my nervous system regulated. But when I was dysregulated and really stuck in the storm, I got adjusted every single day for those first couple of weeks that I first began chiropractic, because there was a level of kind of digging out that my nervous system needed to have happen for it first to get to the point where I could now be in this this kind of ongoing, proactive, stay ahead of the storm way. So it takes time, it takes repetition, and it takes those two things, both nervous system healing from the inside out, chiropractic care done in the PX Docs model, and then it takes cleaning up and taking care of our environment and our lifestyles and making sure that our kiddos' nervous systems aren't exposed to nonstop chemicals, nonstop stress, nonstop chaotic schedules. Healing needs space to happen. Healing needs good substances and good nutrients to happen within the nervous system and within the body. So it's a multifaceted process to get to ADHD and anxiety. It involves chemical imbalance, but it isn't just chemical imbalance. That is an oversimplified, outdated theory. And getting better involves neurologically focused chiropractic care, lifestyle, natural, holistic, functional healthcare to really address the root cause at all layers from all angles. And I want you to, if you got a lot out of this episode, right away, as soon as you're done with this one, I want you to go into previous episodes, if you haven't heard them yet, and go into the other ADHD is a Superpower episodes. And then I want you to go through an episode where we interview Xander's mom and the story of hope for Xander, and find it on the website. We're going to drop it. We'll drop the links to these episodes in the show notes. So if you don't, we've had, I think by the time this one comes out, we're 60 to 70 episodes. We're coming right up on our 1 year anniversary, by the way. So if you're listening to this kind of right after it's released, get ready. The week or so after this is going to be a big old party. Lots of fun, really cool stuff coming with that. But I want you to check out those podcasts. We'll drop them in the show notes. If you love to read, like if you love to read articles and get into the neuroscience, I've got all the research linked on the website that debunks the chemical imbalance theory. And more importantly than those research, we've got all the research behind the perfect storm, sympathetic dominance, nervous system dysregulation, vagus nerve dysfunction, and ADHD and anxiety. And so we'll drop all the resources that you need to get to those things in the show notes with this one as well. What I want you to know is this in closing: your child's potential is far greater than any label or any diagnosis. We will continue to talk about various diagnoses and labels like ADHD, anxiety, autism, epilepsy on this podcast, but we're doing it so we can capture your attention and your awareness, so we can then do what the medical system has not yet done for you, which is really explain the root cause and the drug-free, natural solutions and options you have. By addressing that true root cause, you can unlock a level of healing for your child that'll honestly leave you speechless. It has transformed my life. It has transformed lives like Xander, like Hannah, and I could go on and I could literally share thousands of cases of natural, root cause, drug-free, through nervous system focused chiropractic healing stories from ADHD and from anxiety. Many of them already on medications when they started. Do not think, oh, we're already on medications, we can't get the benefit. No. Get started, get after it. It adds a layer. It adds a little more time and repetition and some journey to the healing. But we absolutely, as PX Docs, are ready for it, trained to do it, and experienced in it. So if you haven't yet gone to the website, pxdocs.com, plugged in your city, your state, your zip code, and found your local PX doctor, make sure after this one you do that too. Knowing the root cause of these conditions, no matter which ones we're talking about, is the first step in knowing what action to take to get your child to truly transform and truly heal. As always, everybody, we love this community. We are coming up on our 1-year anniversary. And again, we have some really cool, fun stuff to do with this. Some of it's going to make me laugh. Some of it, I know, because it involves my kids and my family, is going to make me cry, but in the best of ways. We have had the time of our life with this first year of bringing this podcast to you. And we have only just begun. So we need your help, as always, continuing to share it. Thank you for downloading, subscribing. Please do that every single time. If you're listening to it, but not officially downloading it and following it and subscribing it, it's kind of different, whether it's Apple or Spotify, but that really helps. If you would be so inclined to leave us a review, we would absolutely love a review from you. And then if you really find these helpful and you know other family members, other people, other families at school or where you work or wherever, send a text, send an Instagram DM with this podcast episode link, and let's get this word out there, because it's already many decades late, I think, that we should have debunked this chemical imbalance theory and been telling the millions of families who are struggling with ADHD anxiety, here's the actual root cause, and here's some drug-free, root cause-focused approaches you can take to help your child heal. God bless. Be well. We'll see you on the next one.